Esau was a man of the field, but Jacob chose to dwell in the tents. Second, Esau sells his birthright. Esau was the firstborn. But we know the story. One day he came back tired and he was very hungry. His brother had cooked some stew. And he said, please give me the stew. Jacob said, if you give me your birthright as the firstborn, I will give you the stew. Esau said, done, let's shake hands. And they signed the deal. I don't know if you've heard this, but many years ago, there was a Colombian drug smuggler called Pablo Escobar, very famous guy. He said something, which I don't believe is always true, but it's very famous. He said, everybody has a price. The important thing is to find it. Everybody has a price. The important thing is to find. Or like Prophet Marlon Brando would have said, Jacob said, I will make him an offer he cannot refuse. I will give you stew. And Esau could not refuse that offer. Sometimes we give Jacob a very bad name. But understand this. Jacob realized the value of a birthright. These brothers willingly entered into a transaction. Right? There was no coercion on either side. It was a willing transaction. You give me a birthright, I will give you the stew. Every wise businessman knows that when you finally sign the deal, leave some extra change on the table. If you're negotiating to buy a company for $10 million, leave 10 million 10.5 million on the table for goodwill, because you don't know tomorrow how it's. Leave some extra money for goodwill. Little extra. All smart businessmen will do that. Esau wanted stew. If you read the Bible, you will realize that Jacob also gave him bread. When he saw the bread, Esau looked up. He said, don't worry, the bread basket is on the house. He left something extra on the table. What is this birthright that Esau sold? It was the right to have double portion of the inheritance. It was the right to be the next patriarch of the family. It was the right to be the next priest. Because you find Jacob offering worship. At the end of his life, he leaned on the staff and he worshipped. At Bethel, he offered worship. But you never find Esau worshiping. It was a right to be a prophet. You never see Esau prophesying. But Jacob prophesied over all the sons. To be the birthright of the firstborn was a big deal. And he gave it up for a pot of stew. Then it says there, Esau despised his birthright. He despised his birthright. He just got up and left, and it says he ate the stew, despised his birthright and walked out. You realize, right, that this is not really about Jacob and Esau. This is about you and me and every person listening to the story about Jacob and Esau. It says in John 1:12, for as many as received him, he gave to them the right to become children of God. The right to become children of God. To as many as received Jesus, he gave them the right to become children of God. And then Romans 8:17 it says, if children, then heirs, heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ. This, we are not talking of some small thing. If you receive Jesus, you get the right to become a child of God. And if you become a child of God, then you are an heir of God, a joint heir with Christ. The people watching or hearing me now are being offered this birthright now. Right now, you are being offered a choice. You're being offered the option of becoming a child of God. You're being offered a child to become a joint heir with Christ. I have to tell you one thing. God does not make an offer you cannot refuse. God only makes offers that you should not refuse. You understand? The choice is still with us. God never makes an offer that you cannot refuse. He only makes offers that you should not refuse. If you have any sense, you will not refuse that. I believe almost everybody here has accepted that right to become the child of God. But there are many people listening who want to become the child of God, but they have never gone that last mile and said, Jesus, you are the Lord of my life. They have never given the control of their lives 100% to the Lord. When you do that, when you acknowledge Jesus as your Lord and Savior, then you become a child of God. Esau was born in a good family. There are many Christians who are born in Christian homes, like Esau. But they despise the birthright. They despise the right to become the child of God. They think somehow by being a child of Isaac, I have made it. If Esau did not make it, everybody who's born in a Christian home will not necessarily have it made. To as many as received him, he gave the right to become children of God. In Hebrews 1:2 it says, we are told that God has appointed Christ heir of all things. God has made Christ heir of all things, which means what? All things includes heaven, includes everything in time and everything in eternity. Includes everything that you can think of and everything that you cannot think of. Jesus is the heir of all of those things. Right? God has made Jesus heir of all things. And if you are the child of God, you are a joint heir with Christ of all those things. Yet, there are people who are playing fast and loose with Christ. They are despising the birthright. Forget all those things. I mean, just the prospect of spending eternity with Christ is of immeasurable value. I mean, there's nothing like it. Jesus is not ashamed to call us his brethren. That's what the word says. He's not ashamed to call them his brethren. But there are people still wondering, should we be a joint heir of, is Jesus good enough for us to be a joint heir with him? Then I'm just fast forwarding because most of us know the story. Isaac, it's time for Isaac to leave, so he wants to bless Esau. Isaac is, somehow got this pet personal thing that he wants to bless Esau. It's not as if he doesn't know that Jacob is the one to be blessed, but he wants to bless the firstborn. So he says, go and do this, go and hunt some wild game and make a nice stew and I'll bless. Somehow Jacob comes to know about this and he dresses up like Esau, like a hairy guy, has his mother make a lovely stew and goes and comes and stands in before Isaac. Nice, awesome, hot bowl of stew. And he's waving the aroma towards his dad. And dad does his first due diligence test. Check. He says, come. And he checks. He checks and he says, okay, it's fine. So he passes the first due diligence test. Then he eats it. Isaac asked only for stew. Jacob also gave him wine. Maybe to befuddle him. I don't know. Isaac does the second due diligence test. He sniffs the sniff test. Says, you smell like, you don't sound like Esau, but you definitely smell like him. And he blesses him. Isaac blesses Jacob, thinking it is Esau. After a few minutes, in fact, not even after a few minutes, the way I read it, it's like one of those movies where the guy just left the room and the villain comes in. It's just like that. It's just like that. The shadow has just left the room and from the other door the person comes in. And he cries when he realizes what happened. Don't you have anything left for me? He cries, not shouts of joy and victory. He cries. It says he lifted up his voice and he wept. And then Isaac tells him also something. We might think it is a blessing. We might be mistaken to think that Isaac blessed poor Esau also. But if you read it, it's a curse. Beginning to end, it's a curse. I'll show you. Because the King James Version says, behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. Your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth and of the dew of heaven from above. But the NIV and many other translations say, you will live away from the richness of the earth and away from the dew of heaven above. Meaning, don't expect anything great from either all your fields and things. You're going to live in wilderness. Next he tells him, by your sword you shall live. You need anything, you need to kill. But what did Jesus say? He who takes up the sword shall perish by the sword. It's a curse. It's a curse. And you shall serve your brother. That's obvious, it's not a blessing. Esau, who was in line to be the patriarch, has to now serve the new patriarch. And then finally there comes something which seems like a blessing. And it shall come to pass when you become restless that you shall break his yoke from your neck. A day will come when you will break the yoke of Jacob from your neck and you will be free. We would think it is a blessing, right? But think about this. When was Lot blessed? As long as he was with Abraham. It may not seem very appetizing, but Esau's only chance at blessing was in sticking close to his brother, in sticking close to the one who was blessed. Aaron's name is not mentioned anywhere in the Bible, even though he is the elder brother, till the moment he decides to come to meet Moses. And then Aaron's blessings start. You understand? The blessings of many lie in them sticking close to the anointed man of God, in sticking close to the one who is blessed. In going your own way, there is no blessing. What did Laban? Laban, is a crooked guy, but he did one thing. When Jacob went to him, he welcomed him and he said, come. The one thing he did. And he would tell Jacob later, I have learned by experience that the Lord has blessed me for your sake. In sticking close to the anointed, Laban was blessed. So this thing that Jacob's yoke will be broken from your shoulder is really not a promise of freedom. It means really saying that day, your blessings will also cease. But God is gracious. He gives him something. Esau survives. Esau lives. To the extent that one day, much later, Esau and Jacob are coming to meet. And Jacob wants to bribe, so he sends some gifts and everything, to Esau, just to placate him. But Esau tells him something. I have enough, my brother. Keep what you have for yourself. So God has blessed him a little bit, എന്ന് പറഞ്ഞാൽ വീടിന് വീട്, കാറിന് കാറ്, സ്വത്തിന് സ്വത്ത്, അത്യാവശ്യം everything Esau has got. You and I would think he is blessed, he's doing well. He says, I have enough. Really? You have enough? You don't have God. How can you say you have enough? This man does not even realize what he is missing. What does it profit a man if he gains the whole world but in the end loses his soul? This man has not realized. Are you beginning to see why God hates this guy? He has no sense of God. He has no sense of what is missing in his life. Let me give you some more reasons. Hebrew 12:16 talks about Esau, and it says there, lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau. Esau was a fornicator and a profane person. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 16. You will ask now, how was Esau a fornicator? I'm sure there are many ways he was a fornicator, but at least clearly there's one way. Abraham was very careful how he chose a wife for Isaac. He said, you shall not take a wife from any of these Canaanite people, but go to my own people and get a wife. Esau knew that. Esau knew that. But yet, he married, you want to know who all he married? He married the daughters of the Hittites, the Hivites, the Ishmaelites. All sworn enemies of Israel. Through his marriage, Esau became the father of the Edomites, who were enemies of Israel. His grandson was Amalek, through whom came the Amalekites, again sworn enemies of Israel. Esau was a fornicator. Esau was a profane person. Do you know what profane means? Profane means somebody who has no regard for God, no regard for spiritual things. He is busy on his own trip. He is busy on his own trip. You call him to church? Nah. Give him the Bible to read? No. He is a profane person. Jacob I have loved, Esau I have hated. But you want to know what God really hated? It was not Jacob and Esau. It was not Esau. And do you know what God loved? It was not Jacob. Of course, he did that. But what were they standing for? If you read Hebrews 1:9, it says there, you have loved righteousness and hated wickedness. God has always loved righteousness and hated wickedness. That is what God has always loved and hated. Jacob and Esau just typified righteousness and wickedness. Now, Jacob was definitely not a righteous guy, by the way. Jacob was not righteous. We saw that he is crooked. He was a crooked guy, right? When his father asked him, "Who are you?" he said, "I am Esau, your firstborn." Next, his father asked him, because father is still doubtful, he said, "Are you really my son, Esau?" Jacob says, "I am." Twice, he pretends to be somebody he is not. For the longest time, Jacob pretended to be somebody he was not. You and I pretend to be more spiritual than we are. You and I can pretend to be more humble than we are. You and I can pretend to be more good than we really are. One day God said, enough is enough. God said, "I'm going to wrestle with your heart. Today, you and I are going to have a heart-to-heart talk." God wrestled with Jacob. There was a physical wrestling, no doubt for sure, but I believe it was also really a wrestling of the heart. This time God asked him, "What is your name?" And for the first time in his life, Jacob says, "I am Jacob. I am crooked. I am evil. I am vile. I cheat people. I do every kind of nonsense that you can think of. I am Jacob. That is me." God said, "Okay, remove all those smelly, filthy rags of your self-righteousness. It's stinking to my nostrils." He told his angels, "Remove all these smelly rags of self-righteousness and your false humility and your false this and your false holiness and your false spirituality and everything." And he said, "I will clothe you with the garment of salvation. And I will put on a robe of righteousness on you, Jacob. And you will no longer be Jacob. I will give you a new name, which is Israel, prince with God." Today, God is wrestling with some hearts. With the hearts of some people who are listening to me. Today is your day to wrestle with God and say, "I will not leave you till you bless me forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever." It's your chance to wrestle with God. It's your chance to wrestle for a blessing, for an eternal blessing, starting now for eternity. But before that, you must answer an important question. What is your name? Who are you? This is the question that each one of us must answer to God. We can either continue playing religion, or we can humble ourselves and say, "Lord, I am not worthy." And if you admit that you're not worthy, if you admit that you've been fooling around, He will remove all those filthy rags and He will clothe us too with the garment of salvation and the robe of righteousness. And that is why God loved Jacob. Because he admitted to who he was. There's one more reason why the Bible tells us that God loved Jacob. It says in John 16:27, "For the Father himself loves you because you have loved me." Jacob loved Jesus, therefore the Father loved Jacob. John 16:27. Jacob loved Jesus. That is why the Father loved Jacob. You will ask, but Jesus came much later, right? Jesus came centuries later. How could Jacob have loved Jesus?